Hi guys, and welcome back to Crafted Quilting Designs. I hope you're well and having such a really fantastic day or night or wherever you are when you're actually looking at this video. I hope the day is going great for you. So today we are on week number 4. We are finally here. Isn't that fantastic? Let's give ourselves a pat on the back. Okay, so we have 2 sets of blocks to make today. So we're going to be making 4 blocks in total, and those blocks are called the Blooming Star and the Candy Twist. Now the Blooming Stars is one of the blocks that I actually created on my own. I've taken a little bit of this block and that block and I've added it together, and I think it comes around really quickly, as well as it looks really beautifully. So take your time when you're actually sewing these together. Now these particular blocks, these 2 sets of blocks, are the sort of the skill building block of the actual quilt top. Okay, so hopefully by this time you would have gained some confidence and you know what you're doing, and you feel really assured about yourself with the quilt top. Okay, so let me take you through now how to make it. There isn't any mishaps really. All I would say is take your time, get your cuts together, follow the instructions quite carefully, and you really shouldn't have any problems. You're making 4 blocks in total, so ideally you should zoom through them quite quickly. Okay, next week all I'm going to do really is show you how to lay the quilt top out and just literally do some borders. We're going to do 2 borders, a slim border and a bigger border, and then we will obviously quilt it, and I will show you my quilt top itself. I think the quilt itself should come up around 60 by 90, somewhere around there, so it's a beautiful size. If you wanted to make yours bigger, by all means you can add more borders, okay, but I thought that was really okay in actually doing that particular size. But it looks really beautiful and I'm sure you'll be pleased with it and so proud of yourself. Alright guys, so let me take you through now how I actually made these blocks. As I said, just pay close attention to the actual colors and where I've actually laid my lights and darks, etc., and my cools and my mediums, so that when you do yours it's a lot more simplistic and you can actually visualize yours in there, okay, in terms of the colors formation of laying out the blocks, because they are important in order to allow the star legs to actually pop and be sort of focus of the actual quilt top. All right, so guys, love you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course I speak too quickly, I really do. It's a teacher in me. So don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, give me a thumbs up. Don't give me a thumbs down though, I don't want to see those. Yeah, they are like, why? What did I do wrong? So don't give me that, just thumbs up. Anyway, enjoy the video. Any questions, don't forget, or please don't hesitate. I always say this every week, to give me a little tinkle. I really don't mind answering your questions. I enjoy doing it, okay? So have a good one, and it will be our reveal next week. I'm so happy. I cannot wait to actually show you what it looks like. It looks absolutely beautiful, okay? And of course, all the details will be in that description box down below. So see you then. Bye for now, and I'll definitely see you next week. Bye-bye. Alright guys, so let's get on with this block. Our block today is called Candy Twist. We'll be making 2 of these particular blocks. We've got another block to make, and we'll get into that in a second once we've completed this one. So our block is called Candy Twist, as I said, and you will see why it's called that, because it does look like a little of a twist of a sweeter, or I don't know what to call it, a candy basically, all right, or the wrapping of a candy. So we need some squares. So I have my squares already cut out there already, and I've cut them into 1/4 square triangles, all right, each of the squares, and you'll have the quantity that is required. I've also got some smaller squares here. I've got my center square from the corner squares and another set of smaller corner squares, all right. We also need some flying geeses as well for these ones, and I'm going to show you how the layout forms for this one as well. So I've already made 3, you need 4, and again all the measurements will be there for you. And I've just got this one to finish off, and so if you've forgotten, you remember that you put your smaller square on top of your rectangle, make sure that once you have sewn on the first smaller square, you actually iron it out. Okay, you press it back out into its correct shape to make that rectangle once again. And you're going to put the other one on and again just sew. Now, to be honest, I haven't really been adding a line to them. I just simply put it on the machine and just simply sew it for the 1/4 inch or that line, sorry, there. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I would say get all of your cuts together so that you can just literally start sewing. I think that's the easiest method to use, and I'm simply just going to cut this off here. If I can find my little small square ruler, which I don't know what I have done with already. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. Right, so there you go. Just cut this off. Open that up. All right, and we're going to fold this back. Now with this block, it does require that you do some pressing in between. You can use your finger and finger press, but I find that with these little flying geese, they don't stay down. Okay, but I always press from the back first, and then I go to the front. All right, just to make sure it stays flat. Now again, you know, I don't like using a very hot iron because I do find that they tend to get distorted because they're so small. I've always found that, so I always try to drop the temperature. Okay, so let's start to lay this out now. So I'm going to start with my center block, and again I'm using directional print, so it's entirely down to you where, or you know, how you want the print to go. In effect, because it's a candy twist, either way will work. It doesn't really matter because we're going to have the star legs at the end. Okay, now what you need to be mindful of is to allow the darker blue to touch. So again, so just as the first center block, when we did that square in a square or diamond in a square, it is basically what we're doing here. Okay, so we do not want it to whereby it's turned this way so that we see the legs. We're not working with that at the moment. Okay, so we're looking to get a different square in the square with the medium blue colors. All right, centered by the florals. All right, and so our smaller squares now, they go in the corner there. I'm just going to move this up a little bit because the block is going to grow. All right, so yeah, and in each corner, so exactly how I'm laying them out is exactly in the way in which I'm actually going to stitch it together. So I'm going to go back there again and there. Okay, so I'm using a darker square just to emphasize and to highlight this, because we want that to be really focused. Okay, now I'm going to go in now and just smoosh these up a little bit just to make sure that I'm smooshing well. I'm going to move these down here. Right, so my next layout now, I'm going to go in with my smaller triangles here, and I'm going to go 2 at a time there. So basically with these, once you're going to cut your squares from point to point, obviously. All right, and you're going to lay that out there, and we're simply going to go all the way around with this. Now it can get very tricky if you lose your place in terms of, if you don't understand where everything goes, and it can get very confusing very quickly. So just take your time when you do this. Okay, I'm not sure if I mentioned it already, but I'll say it again as it popped into my brain, that just to make sure that when you are cutting up your fat quarters, that you do cut on the straight grain. Okay, don't cut on that crosswise grain whereby your blocks can get distorted. Okay, and if it is, and if you have cut, you will find that your block will come out bigger, and you'll be like, well, why is it bigger? And I can only imagine that will be the only mishap that you would find. Okay, so you need to ensure that you are cutting on the correct grain to avoid, okay, the blocks being stretchy. All right, so again, I'm going with my bigger squares now, and I'm just going to fit it into this particular area right there. Okay, now the squares going next to these quarter square triangles may look a bit bigger, but they do fit, trust me, they do fit in nicely. All right, this block does lend a little bit of what you may call it, sort of give, in order for you to actually sew it together and to trim it down, because we are working with a 12-inch block here. That's the size we actually need. All right, so that's looking good. So again, you can see that there is a square forming around there. All right, so the next one is to add on our blue corner squares. Now I'm just going to move these aside so that we have room, because it is growing. And so the next one is to put that there, and that one goes. I'm going to move these as well. There. Okay, and these two, same thing. So remember, you want the point of the triangle touching the previous blue there, okay, that medium blue. You want the dark touching the medium. All right. As I said, it does get a little bit tricky, so take your time and work it out. Just don't rush it. Just take your time, look at the blocks, make sure it makes sense. I would actually take a picture as well and put it onto the pattern so you can see exactly where it's all supposed to go. Okay, so remember, you're making 2 sets of these, hence the reason why I have extra. All right, because I haven't made the other block as yet. Okay, so that is what it looks like so far. At the moment, it looks absolutely gorgeous. It doesn't look like a candy twist at the moment, but once I add on the final 2, it should look like it. All right, so the lighter squares now, and I'm using these as my background because I just want this to pop really, so that it stands out immensely on the quilt top. So these now are going to pop in there, just right there at the top. All right, so remember, I'm using a fat quarter collection here, and all of the fabrics contrast really nicely, so I'm not too bothered about what fabric I use where, as long as it works, which I believe it does. All right, so that's what happens there. The next one goes in there. So all of these quarter square triangles go together, literally. Okay, and remember that the points, they all meet together. Try to find something within the block that reminds you of where everything goes. Okay, so the next one now goes there, and the final one goes there. Okay, now all that's missing is our corners, and now these just fit in right there, and hopefully you can see the twist, the candy twist, and hence the reason why it's called a candy twist block, because it does look, the ends, these are your candy twists here. All right, it looks like a candy twist. So this is your candy twist block, okay, and this is a skill building block here. And when I say the skill building block, it requires for you to concentrate on what you're actually doing, okay, so that you get it right. Now let's talk about sewing this together, and it looks quite confusing. We think, oh gosh, so where am I going to start? Well, first of all, let's try and separate them, and that's how I do things. I teach to break it down simplistically so that the brain responds. All right, so I'm going to move this aside. Always separate the ones that you think might be confusing to you first, and then you start with the middle. So let's sew these together first, and then we're going to sew these together and then this together, just as we would if we're doing a 9 patch. All right, so let's get that on. Then I'm going to come back and show you what it actually looks like. All right guys, so the center block has been sewn, and you need to press, and I have pressed it nicely at the back, making sure it's lovely and flat. Now once you've made this block, it comes up to 7. You need to square it down to 6.5. Extremely important. Do not forget to do that, otherwise you will have a bigger block. Okay, 6.5 you need to square that down to, and I'm going to use my diagonal line just to go right through from that point to that point there to make sure I have an equated amount to trim off on each side. All right, and just sort of settle my 6.5 into this particular square here. So it's very, even if it's quite close, you make sure you trim it down. All right. All right, now, so I have now trimmed this down, and we're getting ready to go now. So let's make the candy twist block. Quite easy to sew together. Now try not to get it twisted around so that you don't get confused. Okay, once we've made the candy twist block, then we shall trim them down to 6.5 by 3.5 also. All right, so 3.5 by 6.5 we need to trim down, and we will do that again. I'm going to move this up, and we're going to work with, I'll put that up as well, and I'm going to make this one here and show you how it actually comes together. So the first thing you're going to sew, and let's break it down again and separate it so that your brain can recognize which parts you sew first. So we're going to sew these 2 together, and then we're going to sew these 3, and then we're going to sew these 2 here. Okay, so remember that you start with these 2. So all we're going to do literally is fold this over front sides, and we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm not going to chain these just because of they're so easy to get confused. I'm going to just do it one at a time and put it back, and all I've done is just finger press to the dark side. Okay, and I'm just going to put it back in its rightful place. All right, what I tend to do is to do both ends first, but to be honest, I haven't done that for all of the blocks. For some of them, I've just worked in the order of which. Okay, so let's move on to the second. I'm just going to take the little thread off there because it annoys me. I'm going to move it onto this one now. So what you need to do is to line up the point, the tip of your smaller triangle to your square. All right, so it's like that, and it's going to flip it over. All right, that's simply it. And we're simply going to do a 1/4 inch seam as normal. Now when I'm sewing this, I literally start to sew from the edge there. Okay, I literally start sewing from there and then go all the way down there. Again, and I'm going to finger press again to the darker fabric. Okay, and put it back in its rightful place. And again, with this one now, the same thing applies. You're working with the tips, one of the tips, the sort of straighter point of the triangle, and fold it over so that it's easier for you to manage. Okay, and then sew. Okay, I'm just going to trim off these little threads that the machine cut off when it's finished sewing. And again, I'm going to press towards the darker, and I'm going to put that back in its rightful place. And I know it looks a bit awkward at the moment, but not to worry about it. And we're going to do these two now, these final two here, and sew them together. Oops, leaving one behind. I'm just trying to line it up. It is so fiddly, these little things, I swear. I don't know if anybody else has that issue, but my fingers kind of would seem to grab them. All right then, so, and again, I'm going to put this back in its rightful place and finger press towards the darker. And I'm going to put it back down there. Now, this is how we put this candy twist block together now. All right, so that's what it looks like. So we need to line up this one with this one here. So the end towards the middle, and we need to make sure those points match. Now, I would advise you to definitely use a pin and nest your seams properly. All right, so we want to nest those seams just to make sure that it's going that way and that way. Remember, the block needs to lay as flat as possible. All right, so just nest your seams, and we're just going to pin and then sew. I think it's advisable to do that because, as you know, these little things tend to move and they can be problematic sometimes. All right, so just as a precaution, I would say pin. Now, if you don't get the points match up exactly, don't beat yourself up about it. To be honest, it's better to, you know, get the block together rather than it being perfect, you know. And always remember that once the whole quilt is completed, you don't see any imperfections. All you see is the beauty. So don't beat yourself up about those things. But if you can match them, and they should, because all the measurements are correct, you shouldn't have a problem, really, okay? But please don't beat yourself up about it. It really isn't the end of the world. Right, let's see how I did, because I literally took the pin out. Oh, that's not too bad. That's very good. All right, so let's do the other side now. And again, put it back. If you're not sure, or you know, you've like, oh, I've lost track, just put it back, look at the others and make sure it's done correctly. And again, same thing, front sides together, you nest your seams. And if you want to press again, you can, but I will press it once I'm done. There we go. I'm just adjusting just to make sure it lines up properly, and I'm taking my time. This is as much as it is an easy block, it is also a very tricky block that could become a problem, so just be careful. It looks hard, but it really isn't. It really isn't. And I will say be careful of your 1/4 inch seam as well. My sewing machine have a tendency to kind of move the fabric a bit, which I've said many times in my videos, or it could be my position of my fingers, because I tend to put my toe I tend to put my fingers close to the actual machine feet, and sometimes it nudges. Okay, but that is it there. So all of the points join really nicely. Okay, now let's give it a good little press. Bring that in so you can see what I'm doing there. Now, try to press it in line in which the actual seams lay, so that it's easier to quilt. Remember, there's a lot of seams in this one, so just be careful of that, be mindful of it. And you can see I have twisted mine there. Okay, so I'm just going to allow it to fall. what I tend to do sometimes is that if I know I have twisted, I tend to literally just put a little snip there, but don't snip the actual stitches, and just so that they can go either way, and that way it lays flatter. If I'm really bothered by it, if I have to be honest, but most times I do. All right, so I'm just going to put a bit of steam there and turn that over. Now this needs to be trimmed to 3.5 by 6, and that's important. Don't forget to do that, because your blocks then would not come together smoothly. I think some water has just wet that. Never mind, that's fine. Okay, so what you need to do now is trim. Very important. So as you can see, all these dog hairs are sticking out. We're going to get rid of that anyway, so don't worry about it. So we're going to trim it down by 3.5 and 6.5. As it is, it comes up to 7, just as when we made this one. Okay, so I'm just going to put that aside because I don't want to cut it accidentally. That won't be good. So remember, 3.5 by 6.5. It's up to you as to which side you do first, to be honest. But I'm going to get my 3.5 centered. And I'm making sure that I have equated amount of blue on each side. Okay. So realistically, I'm removing 1/2 inch. So I'm just making sure that equated 1/2 inch comes off on each end, just so that everything lines up equated or equally. Right, I think that's perfect. So I'm going to cut. I've actually changed the blade in my cutter, so it's beautiful and sharp. Because you know I'm always struggling. I was like, I'm always like that. And I was like, why don't you just change the blooming blade? And that way you don't have to force it or be jagged in your cuts. Just cut it. Just change it, and then, you know, it's fine. So I decided to listen to my own inner voice and just simply changed it. And guys, if I have to be honest, I actually forgot I had new blades. I have a stack of them, and I'm there struggling. I was saying to myself, oh, I need a new cutter. And no, all I needed to do was change the blade. So I'm going to have to remind myself that I have blades. Right, there we go. Last bit to come off. And just give that a good old trim. And we're done. At least with that one. So you're going to do this twice. So that is it there. Okay, now put it back into its correct formation. So remember, florals touching florals. Okay, so ideally these two now should match up, and they do. Okay, so that is it. So we need to finalize the others. Once you've made all of your candy twists, you then need to join these and put it together as a 9 patch as normal. So I'm going to go do that now, get all of them to this stage, and then I'm going to come back and show you the end result. Okay guys, so I have stitched the block together, but not all of it. So I've stitched them together with the background fabric there, along with the actual candy twist block. So hopefully you can make out the fact that this white's called a candy twist. All right, so you can actually see that sort of candy wrapper there. All right, and so what I'm going to do now is join it together, just like you would a 9 patch. All right, and then lining it all up. Okay, making sure that you nest your seams. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll see what a completed block looks like. So just remember to nest your seams with obviously the dark going to the darker fabric, so the seam itself, and also if the seam wants to go into one particular direction, by all means allow it to, just not force it. Okay, but as usual, when you sew these things together, they tend to come together quite easily in terms of nesting the seams. They lay where they want to because there's so many joints of different fabrics. So I'm just going to sew and then show you the completed block. Now just ensure that you have a 1/4 inch seam. There are lots of bulks or joints there, as you would expect for the actual putting this block together, so just ensure that it goes over there. I'm sure you heard that there was a bit of a lumps and bumps as it went over it, but nevertheless it has given me perfect joining there, so you can actually see. Okay, come together really nicely. It doesn't take long to make this block. Actually, it's quite simplistic and it comes together quite quickly. But as I said before, you know, the last 2 blocks are the building skills block of the quilt themselves. It does require some patience, so just take your time and match everything up properly. Ensure that all your cuts are accurate as well. That's the trick for this particular block, so just be mindful of that. And I'm just checking, I don't know if you really can't see really, but I'm just checking to make sure everything lines up properly. And I'm putting my block down and I'm sewing the other part on top. Alright, so that is it there. Absolutely gorgeous, beautiful block, and you can see all of the star legs come together nicely. Alright, yeah, beautiful. So you need 2 of these, okay, and as I said before, just take your time and get it all done. It's a lovely block to make. Make sure you contrast your colors very well, especially for these areas here in the candy twist, because that needs to be prominent so that you can actually see those star legs there. All right, especially in that candy twist block. Okay, I also went for something just a bit mild, that floral in the middle there. All right, because I want it to be noticeable and to, of course, allow the candy twist themselves to actually pop. Okay, so that's the end of that one. Let's move on to the next block now, and I'll show you the sizes and we'll go through them again, just as we've done before. Okay? Okay guys, so we're going to move on to the next star now. So the next star is called Blooming Star, okay? And we need 2 of this one. Now we're going to use more or less the same components that we used for the other star, all right? So I have the same set of cuts here. I have this time the blues and I have my browns, okay? Whereas before I think I used blue florals for this one, for the other one, all right? And I've got the same components again to make my flying geese. I've got my 4 corner units here. I've got my other larger or medium sized corner units, as well as these ones here, another set of corner units. And for these ones here, we're going to make some of a sort of a mini flying geese, these ones in the corner up here. And the strips of fabric up here is literally to border the star, okay? So what we need to do first is to use our 1/4 square triangles to make half square triangles. And obviously that's quite simplistic, so we're going to take 1 of each and sew together to make a half square triangles. All right, so you need to do that for all of your squares. So sew together and make a half square triangle. All right, and of course we've got our middle component. So what I'm going to do is to start making my half square triangles, and then we will move on to how the block actually lays out, which I think will come together a lot more easily. and more quickly. All right, and then we move on to making these sort of smaller flying geese as well. Now, to make your flying geese, we are using the brown florals and my blue squares here. Again, you would notice that I'm using that prominent color of that dark blue to really show up those star legs, as well as to help with those smaller star legs for making the flying geese. All right, so the same things that we've done before. So the flying geese we're going to make, these are our corners and these are our corners. That's our center block. These are here our sort of mini flying geese, or half flying geese I should call them, because we don't complete them totally as a flying geese. All right, so that's that one there. And then obviously we've got our quarter square triangles, which we've used the same dark blue color and a brown florals to actually make our half square triangles. So I'm going to get started sewing now, and then I will hopefully be able to show you how the block comes along. Okay. So of course we're going to do front sides together, and once we've done these, we need to trim these down also. They don't stay in the original size that they're supposed to be. All right. Again, you can, I would, if I was you, just simply chain piece them so they go by very quickly. Again, use whatever methods it suits you, really. I mean, by this time, I think you have gotten the gist of, you know, compiling your quilt top however you feel happy with. So do whatever makes feel better for you. But I'm going to zoom these through using the chain piecing method so that it finishes quite quickly. Alrighty then, so now I have made all of the half square triangles, and I need to trim them down to 2.5. all right, so I'm not going to press them open. I'm going to use my clearly slotted perfect trimmer and trim them down so that it comes up really quickly. And this is a really good tool, guys. If you have one, it will be helpful to make you trim them quickly. So 2.5, put it on the slotted line there, which sort of indicates it's your stitch line, and then you can trim. I'm just going to put it to one side, okay, and then trim off the excess on the other side. All right, just to allow it to go quickly. And in case you're wondering what the slots are, that's to take your trimmers and just literally go in between there to clip off your dog hairs. All right, so once you run your blade in between there on the fabric, it literally takes off the dog hairs as well. So again, line up that slotted line on your stitch line, and I'm just lining up to the edge there of the actual fabric, and I'm just going to cut. All right, and you will have your 2.5. So that's one done. So it goes very quickly once you have more or less chain piece all of them quite quickly. Now you can do this together for both if that makes life easier for you. While I was at the sewing machine, I also went ahead and make up my flying geese. All right, again, just saving time so that the block comes together quite quickly. So I'm going to continue doing this, so you can just basically look at me doing this. Okay then, so what I'm going to do now is give this a good press open. Now that's important because it helps you to lay out the actual blocks, or to start to form the star itself quite easily. All right, so I'm just going to press them open and I'll be back in a mo. All right, so I've pressed them open now, and basically you just simply need to trim off your door guards there. Now you can use your rotary cutter if you want, but I'm just going to use my little snippers here just to get it all off. Okay, so that's done now. Right, so flying geese are made, your half square triangles are made and all trimmed to 2.5. Okay, and we've got our remaining squares here to use up. So let's lay the block out now. Oh, I think I missed one, so I've got to do that one. That is good that I noticed that, because I would have been like, oh my god, what did I do with the other blocks? So let me do this now as I spotted it. I'm going to finger press this because I don't want to go back to the iron, and I'm going to trim this one off here. Alright then, so that's done now. Okay, so let's lay this one out. Now this comes together very similar to the first one, but some little changes. Okay, so we're going to start with the center square. Now just ensure that you're, again, and I know I've said this before, but I'll repeat myself, that if you're using directional print, that they all lay the same way. Now, and that is exactly what I did with this one, because I know my prints on my dark blues are there. I ensured that once I laid it out, they all were very similar. All right, because you want, when you put your blocks together, it looks the same basically. All right, so just be mindful of that. Okay, so let's start now with our center block, and then we will start forming the block quite easily. So as I was saying, it comes together very similarly to the actual first one. All right, the only difference is we are going to change the orientation of the flying geese. So in the first block we had the flying geese with the print fabric touching the center square, so they were all laid out like so. Now before I move on, I did not trim underneath. I left it on, no particular reason. Well, laziness, if I have to be honest. Okay, but it makes no difference really to the block itself. The fabric is not bulky in any way, shape or form, but so if you want to trim it off, you can. All right, so going back to the orientation of the middle star, when we first made the first star, we had all of the colors coming together like so. Okay, so we can see that square in a square. All right, we're going to change it around, and so we're going to be forming ourselves a little star in the middle. It's rather interesting that slight turn of a block can make it so different from what you originally intended to be. So just be careful of how the orientation is, especially of the middle block that you're forming, because it's, you know, as I said, a slight turn can change it. All right, so we want, in this case now, we want the star legs to show. All right, and then we're going to finish this off with our light blue squares right in the corner there. So it comes together very similarly to the first one, as I said, but the only difference is that we had the blocks turned this way to make that square in a square. Now we want that star in the middle of the block. So let's sew this together. In fact, no, before we sew this together, let me continue laying it all out, and then I will show you. All right, so the next step now is to add on these here, and we need to lay these here. And that one there, that one there. So what you're aiming at is to allow all of the blues to come together in the corner there. All right, just try and remember that, so that all the blues come together touching there. All right, so again there, and that one there, and that one there, and the final one goes there. Okay, so I hope you can see another star forming. So with our blue florals now, we are going to lay them in the corner there. And this one goes there, and this one goes there. Okay, and now you're wondering, well, what happens with the middle? Okay, so in the middle, what we're going to do now is have these blues, sorry, these blues, okay, brown florals and the dark blues. And what we're going to do literally is to snowball the corners like so for both of them. So we're going to have each have a snowball corner there like so. So hopefully you can get the eye there. So it should make that pattern there. All right, so I'm going to do that now, and then I'll come back and fit them in, and then you will know exactly what I'm trying to say. All right, so I'm just going to fold that there right on top of it, and you're going to do the same as though you're making a flying geese. You're going to draw a line, sew on that line, fold it over, do the same thing for the opposite side. All right, so let's go do that now. All right, so before I stitch it all together, let me just make sure you're clear on what I'm referring to. So I have now sewn on my smaller square onto my rectangle, and I've just stitched on that line, and now I'm going to trim it off using a 1/4 inch seam, or it doesn't really have to be a quarter, as long as you don't trim on the actual stitch line. Okay, I'm going to fold that over now, and I will take my other smaller square, and then I'm going to place it on top there, and I'm going to sew on the opposite side now so that it looks like this. All right, so let's do that now, and then we will start sewing the block together as though it's a normal 9 patch. Okay, now the composition of all of the blocks has more or less been very similar. There hasn't been anything different in any way, so hopefully you're not confused by it all. And if you are, please do not hesitate to ask me or drop me a line. It really isn't a problem. All right, so I'm going to trim that off if I can find it. I just flicked it somewhere. And okay, your block now looks like this. Okay, right, so I'll cut that bit off. So what we're going to do is sew the middle together first, as we did with the first block. As I said, the construction is very much the same. So we're going to sew this one together, those together, and then these together, and then these together. All right, so let's go do that now. All right, so let's sew the main middle together now. So I've sewn the 3 components together. You just need to join them as you would any of the other blocks. Okay, so let's do that now. I'm just going to continue sewing the whole thing together, and I'll show you how it comes. Now, if you notice, I've added in this particular smaller flying geese, or half a flying geese unit here, and that actually joins it. So once we have sewn these 3 together, we will then sew these together, and these 4 together, just as you would normally. So we complete the middle, we sew the 3 together, ensuring that the brown is touching the brown. We do not want the blue touching the brown for the half a flying geese unit, sorry. All right, so we want the brown touching the brown. Okay, that's what we're aiming at. All the blues should more or less be sticking outward. Okay, so that's it. So again, sew these together, complete the middle, sew the whole row together at the top, the row together at the bottom, and you will complete it as you would any other normal block. Okay, So let's go do that now. Okay guys, so I have now sewn the 3 components together. What we're going to do is fold this over and fold this one over and sew them. So I'll come back and show you that, what it looks like. Okay guys, so that is our star. Now what we need to do now is to trim this up. Just make sure all the edges are lovely and straight. Ideally you have a little bit of a wiggle room. So as it is right now, it comes up to 10.5. Okay, you can make sure that all of the edges are nice and straight, and even if you take you measure it down or trim it down to 10.25, that's fine. All right, so I'm just going to trim my edges up just to make sure it's lovely and straight. I'm not too bothered about taking anything off, because what we need to do with this block is to then border it so that it comes up to 2.5. Hence the reason I said that as long as you straighten all the edges is not a big deal if it's 10.5 or 10.25. all right, so I reckon by the time you straighten up your edges, you should ideally come up to 10.25, because you'll take off those extra little trimmings and little bowing that I have there. All right, so just little things like that to be mindful of. But as I said, the block itself is going to be bordered, so it's not a massive issue. Okay, so let's have a look at this side now. That looks okay. Right, so with the strip of florals now, what we're going to do is simply sew it round. And it's important that you have the same color here, because what we want is the star, the blooming star, to literally pop off of that border and of that background for color that we have going on there. All right, so all we need to do now is to border around it. Okay, and let me show you the one that I've already done and what it's going to look like. So this is what the finished product would look like. Okay, so it's very important that you border it around. Make sure you measure it. The block itself comes up to 12.5, very important. Once you've done that, then the block is completed, and you need 2 of these. Okay guys, so that is our block. So that's one. Let me get the other one for you. So you need 2 each. All right, so you need 2 blocks each. So those are our blocks. So this is your Candy Twist block, and this is your other block. And you can see both of them are 12 inches, 12.5 inches. Okay, so that is it guys. So next week what we're going to do is to lay it out, and of course formate all of the whole quilt top together, get it looking all beautiful. I'll show you how to stitch it, and of course you can then start thinking about what sort of quilt patterns you want to use for your quilt top. All right, and we'll discuss that all of that next week. But that is your quilt blocks for this week. So again, to repeat, you've got your blooming star, you need 2, and you've got your Candy Twist, and you need 2 of those. Absolutely beautiful blocks. Okay, and again, pay attention to your colors in terms of your lights and darks, and where you form your lights and darks. As you can see, it's very important with the darks, because it helps the pattern itself, the star, to come out. Okay, and these are very beautiful. Look at that, it gives you sort of that arrow there, and the intention of this block is so that to show that it's illuminated, it's blooming out. All right, and of course we've got our Candy Twist block, so 2 of each guys. So that's it for this week. So next week is going to be our putting the whole quilt top together, and of course stitching, adding borders, etc., sew it all together, and getting the quilting done and showing the final reveal. Okay, so bye for now, and of course happy quilting guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I shall see you next week without fail. So have a look at your blocks again, and that's it. So all the details would be in the description box down below, so don't forget to check that out. Any questions, please don't forget to give me a little tinkle and I'll be too happy to respond. Bye.